if you're looking for a book to help you with textual criticism, and you're interested in textual criticism, I've got a review here today that might be helpful to you. So let's jump into it and look at it. So before we begin, I'd like to ask you, do you have a book that you'd recommend to us for textual criticism? If you have one that's been helpful to you, would you drop it down in the comment section below so we can all kind of take a look and see what books have been, beneficial to you? So today I'm going to be reviewing this book by David Alan Black. It's called New Testament Textual Criticism, A Concise Guide. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be giving you basically an overview of the entire book to begin with, just kind of telling you what kind of ground he covers in this book, and then at the end of the video I'll tell you who I think this book would be useful to or helpful to. So if you like these kinds of things, if you're interested in the Greek New Testament, if you're interested in theology or anything like that, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also hit the like and subscribe button. So basically this book is broken up into 3 sections. In the first section, he entitles Scribes, Scrolls, and Scripture. And in this, he explicitly lays out that the goal for New Testament textual criticism is to recover the original text of the apostles. And that's important because today a lot of scholars have abandoned the hope of actually finding the original text. They talk about finding the earliest available text or something like that. But David Alan Black explicitly lays out that the goal for textual criticism should be to obtain the original text. If you've watched the debate between Bart Ehrman and Daniel Wallace, you know that this has really become kind of bones of contention. He talks about the different writing materials that are there. You're going to go through some basic stuff. He's going to give you some basic information. You're going to find out what the difference between, the papyri manuscripts versus the codex and things like that. Just kind of giving you a basic overview of the writing materials. He's going to talk to you about important Greek manuscripts. He's going to talk to you about the types of mistakes that scribes would make. He also will talk about the various early versions that were out there. I'm talking about, whether it's Latin, Gothic, or Coptic. He's going to talk about, what the available evidence is for establishing the New Testament text. He's also going to talk about the witness of the Church Fathers and how that patristic evidence plays in to a certain extent to Greek textual criticism. So that's kind of the ground that he covers in the first section of Scribes, Scrolls, and Scripture. And I don't think in that section there was anything that was, I would say, wouldn't be too, controversial. Now when he moves into the second section, this is where it might get a little bit more controversial. The second section talks about corruption to restoration. And he sort of gives you an overview and history, a history of, the textual development. He goes all the way from the earliest times to the Middle Ages to Erasmus, all the way into the modern era. He talks about Westcott and Hort, and he does this in a very, very concise way. And in fact, I should say in the first section, he does that too. He packs a lot of information in just a little bit of time. He talks about the principles of establishing the original reading. He talks about the external evidence. He gives you an overview of the various text types, whether they're Alexandrian, Western, or Byzantine. He goes over that information. He goes over the various criteria that modern scholars use now in regards to establishing the text of the New Testament. Like I said, he goes over the external. He gives 2 or 3 different principles in terms of external evidence that scholars use. He also goes over internal, and I'll list the major categories. We'll just display that on the screen for you the different external and internal criteria that he uses, whether it's preferring the reading attested by the oldest manuscripts, the most widely geographically represented reading, internal criteria. I'll just display that on the screen for you. And then one of the other things that he covers in this section is he talks about the various schools of thought as they apply to textual criticism. And again, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road, depending on what sort of theory that you have in regards to textual criticism. And it's just sort of a broad overview. And he basically identifies 4 different camps or 4 different schools of thought in regards to textual criticism. Now, some people who he would probably lump in those various camps wouldn't be satisfied with them. But again, this is just a book that's just supposed to give you an overview. He talks about radical eclecticism, which again, probably I might be caricaturing it just a little bit, but radical eclecticism is the idea that you really focus on internal evidence to the exclusion of worrying too much about external evidence. He talks about reasoned eclecticism, which reasoned eclecticism I would say is probably the dominant view in the academy right now. This is a view of people like Bruce Metzger, the Allens when they were active in publishing. He talks about reasoned conservatism. And I don't think reasoned conservatism is very well represented now. Somebody in the comment section down below, if you know some people who are favorable towards reasoned eclecticism, reasoned conservatism, you might drop their names down in the comment section below. But reasoned conservatism basically takes the various text types as equals. They're all representing very ancient texts. It doesn't favor the Byzantine over the Alexandrian in terms of how early they think these texts represent. He thinks reasoned conservatism would say that all of these various text types are pretty much equal in regards to how ancient they are. And then what he identifies as radical conservatism, and he mentions here Hodges and Farstad, which basically, if you're familiar with Hodges and Farstad, they did a printed edition of the Greek New Testament, which was called, I believe, the Greek New Testament according to the majority text, something close to that. I'll display on the screen what the actual title there is, but basically favors the Byzantine text type. Now, Hodges and Farstad, I believe, have both passed away, and that mantle has sort of passed to Maurice Robinson. So, as I said, Maurice Robinson would probably be, if David Allen Black were to rewrite this book or do a revision on it, Maurice Robinson would probably be the principal proponent of this view now. What he does not go into are various preservation views. There are some views out there that would say that the text has been providentially preserved by God and something like the TR or something like that. He doesn't address any of those preservationist views. And then finally, the third section that he has, it's called From Theory to Practice. And then he just starts giving you some examples. One example that he gives is Mark 1:2. And again, I can display that for you on the screen, how he handles Mark 1:2. A lot of people might be very satisfied with how he handles Mark 1:2. Some others might be disturbed. The one thing he doesn't cover in regards to Mark 1:2, as you can see on the screen, is, some scholars have tended to think if you go with an Alexandrian reading here, you've basically created a problem for biblical inerrancy. That's something that he doesn't address here. But for a number of thinking Christians, that's an issue. And now, on the other side of that, obviously, there are people who would argue that you can take the Alexandrian reading and there's a way to work with that within the framework of biblical inerrancy. But still, regardless of which way you go on that subject, It's a significant issue, and he doesn't really address that here in this book. Probably beyond the scope of what he's trying to do in this book. Who should buy this book? Who's this book for? In my opinion, this would be a good book for someone who's wanting to know how modern textual criticism is practiced now. It is a very, very concise book. I think it's like 80 pages. You can read this book in about a setting or two, and you can get a good overview of the various manuscripts that are available, the writing material. When people start talking about textual criticism, you'll have an idea of what they're talking about. But if you're interested in a really deep dive into textual criticism, if you're wanting to go into the, way down into the weeds into the various issues, this might be a good starting point. You can kind of get your feet wet and get an idea about what it's all about. But that being said, you're not going to walk away from this book and be an expert on textual criticism. You're just not. It's too brief. It's too short. There's not enough information to really be able to, do a really deep dive. You're not going to walk away from this and be able to correct, Bruce Metzger in his textual commentary. That's just not going to happen with this kind of book. But it is a very good, very brief overview. You can, as I said, you can read it, in a setting or two, and have a pretty good idea of what's going on when people are talking about issues related to textual criticism. So if you found this video useful, let me know by hitting the like button. And if you're interested in these sorts of things, you can hit the subscribe button and the notify bell. We'll let you know when more videos like this appear. So thanks again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.